Stop following business best practices that make you want to hide under your desk. What if I told you that your human design chart already has the best business strategy mapped out for you? Hey, I'm Elise and I've been in business since 2011 and I've been helping creative entrepreneurs grow their businesses without social media using email marketing and human design. And if you're here, then we are talking about human design. And today I am going to talk to you about how you can use your chart to unlock your own business strategies and how you can apply your own biz best practices and figure out what is going to work best for you. Now, before we dive into that, I do want to talk about what are business best practices that you might be following right now. One of the ones that I hear the most and just makes my gut fill in on itself, and that is having to post every day on social media. Now, the biggest thing to be aware of and mindful about, particularly when it comes to anyone saying this is like a business best practice, is that we always want to make sure that we're just filtering it through our own way of doing things. And that's really what human design is going to help you understand and do, is having your own blueprint for doing the things that are naturally easy and fun for you. If you ever hear business practices touted around like you must post on social media every day, you have to make quick decisions in your business, you've got to be launching every quarter, or any other thing that someone is telling you, that immediately you get a body response where it's just like, ooh, no, don't want to do that. That's something to pay attention to. And here's why most of these strategies and tactics and best practices don't work for everyone, right? There is no one blanket rule that says this is the way that you have to do business. But then how do you figure out what that looks like? Well, that's exactly why I really want to talk to you about how your own human design chart is your blueprint for your own business best practices. So let's start with the foundation. What do you want to always start with when it comes to human design and business best practices? And that is your strategy and authority. So we are going to switch to looking at a chart, and it's actually going to be mine. I'm just going to walk you through where you can find this information. So we always start with strategy and authority because it is the 80-20, right? The number one thing that you want to master when it comes to using human design in your business is your own strategy and authority. It is literally your guiding principle for everything. So let's go and have a look at that, what you want to pay attention to, and how you start to really truly integrate that as you start to map out your own business best practices. So this is my chart that we're looking at. And if you want your own chart like this that has an entire business flavor to it, it's the best way to explain it, then you can go to hustleandgroove.com/chart and you will be able to get your own chart, and you can download it. If you just scroll back up here, you can just hit download once you get to this point. But when you're looking at your own chart, and whatever chart tool you use doesn't matter, it typically looks something like this. You will see your actual chart on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side is where you're going to find the information that we're looking for. So we are looking for strategy and inner authority. And this is going to tell you what it is, and it's also going to give you a little bit of a perspective from a business slant, right? Because I'm here to help people truly understand how their human design can be used and applied to make aligned decisions, to market their business, all the things. So you're going to find your strategy and inner authority. Now, why is this the first step? Well, as I said, 80-20 approach. If you only ever understand your strategy and authority, you're 80% of the way there, and you literally can't go wrong because all roads lead back to strategy and authority. Whatever else is going on in your chart, whenever it comes to making a decision, strategy and authority are what you always default to first. Everything else in your chart supports you in terms of helping you come up with ideas and creating and all the things. But the bottom line in terms of what you put out into the world and the way that you market your business is always based on your strategy and authority. So you always want to figure out what that is first. So as you can see, mine is to respond and inform, and my inner authority is sacral. And this is because I'm a manifesting generator. There are some key components to each type. So when you're looking at your own chart, it is based on what your type is that then informs your strategy, and then your inner authority is based on whatever else is going on in your chart. So do that. Step one, find out what your strategy and authority is, and know that this is your guiding principle for everything. Anything that you want to do in your business, if you're looking to make a decision, you follow strategy and authority. It is really as simple as that. Then let's talk about the next part of this entire chart and how it can help you and support you in creating your own aligned business best practices. Once you understand strategy and authority, the next thing that we want to pay attention to is your messaging. And your messaging is largely going to come through from your throat center. So if you're looking at your chart, you can see that we start at the top, and this is your head center, this is your ajna or mind center, and then this is your throat center. Now, this is the center for communication. It's the center for messaging. All channels lead to the throat center. It has the most amount of gates in the center, and that is because this is where we manifest, this is where we communicate, and this is ultimately how we take action. Now, whether you have this defined or not, it is still the center where we communicate from and express ourselves from. So if you have it defined, it will be colored in like mine is. And based on the gates that you have defined in the center is going to influence the way that you communicate, right? The way that you talk about things. And it will also help you identify your magnetic messaging, right? The things that you're going to talk about and the way that you're going to talk about it. Now, here's the thing that I want to say at this point in time. This should not be new to you. As you're going through and looking at your individual gates and you're paying attention to the centers that you have defined and you're learning about those, most of this should feel good to you, should feel familiar. If it doesn't, then that's typically a sign that either your birth date and time are not quite right, so just always double check those, or you've been heavily conditioned. And conditioning is just normal. We are all exposed to it. There are pockets of time in our lives where most of us can go back and go, you know what, something just worked really well. And this will probably be reflected back to you in your chart in all the elements that are there. Because when we do things in alignment, in other words, when we just do the things that are naturally easy and fun for us, and we don't allow other external factors to influence us, then things just work. And that's why I'm so passionate about human design in business, is that if we can get to that space for ourselves, right, we can just do the things that are easy and fun for us, then everything in our business works. No matter what we're trying to do, doesn't matter what strategy, what tactic, if we're doing things in alignment, if we're doing things that are easy and fun, then it always works. And it's less about the strategy and more about, is this easy and fun for me? Am I following strategy and authority? Go and have a look at your own chart, have a look at your throat center, and then go and have a look at the individual gates that you have defined and discover and learn how you're designed to cultivate and create your messaging. Now, if you want to learn more about how this actually works and go into all the individual gates and what that means, then inside my book, Cultivate You, you're going to learn more about that. And then if you just grab the Cultivate Your Business series, you'll be able to go through every core element of your chart and start to apply it into your business. More details about that below. So identify your throat center. If it's defined, then you're going to be someone who is more inclined to speak your messages. And this is why I'm doing a YouTube channel. In fact, I have two, because I have found that it's so much more easier for me to speak things, but also people love hearing my voice and they get things out of it that I don't even realize is happening. And that's just because I have that defined energy. Now, if you have an open center here, right? If your throat center is open or undefined, and the difference between the two is one is there's no defined gates at all, and one is it's open, like it's white, but there are some defined gates, which means you've got a little bit more access to energy in that throat center versus if you have no gates defined. At the end of the day, if it's white, then you don't have consistent access to that energy, but it also means that you have full flexibility. So when it comes to messaging and the way that you communicate that message, it's largely going to depend on your audience and what resonates the most with them, but also in the moment, what feels aligned for you. So this is where you step down into following strategy and authority. More often than not, when it comes to the messages that you're communicating and doing from your throat center, if it's open, so if it's white, you're more here to speak for other people. So you're not necessarily here to manifest your own things into existence, because if you have a defined throat, then you are going to be manifesting things. You can speak them into existence. If it's open, then you're more here to be a voice for others, to be here to speak powerfully for the people that you're looking to help. So go ahead, look a little bit more into your own individual gates and understand what your own messaging is and the way that you're designed to communicate. Once we've got strategy and authority, we know our messaging is happening through our throat center. Where is the next place that we go? Well, that is typically offer creation, right? The way that we create our offers, the way that we bring them to life. And that is largely going to be a sacral function. Now, again, whether you have this defined or not, doesn't really matter. It does. And we'll talk about that in a second. I'm not trying to minimize that. But this is the center for creation. It's also the center for timing. It's also where you're probably going to come up with pricing, that type of thing. So whether it's defined or not, it will depend on the gates that you have access to in this particular center and if there are any channels. And those are the way that you tend to create things. So if you have it defined, then that means that you're a mani-gen or you're a generator. And this just simply means that we have access to this center 24/7. It means that we have all the energy that we could possibly need to bring something to life. However, if you are a generator or a manifesting generator, it's really important that you create in response. So whatever your own strategy is going to depend on how you actually create. So generators, manifesting generators are always going to create in response. Once you are responding to something external, then you have the energy to bring forth it to life. However, that is going to happen is going to be based on those gates that are defined. Now, if you are a manifestor, a projector, or a reflector, you don't have this center defined, but you may have some gates defined, right? So it depends on your own chart and what that looks like. If you do have defined gates, then those are the gates that are going to be the ones that you lean into when it comes to creating. But you're still going to follow your strategy when it comes to that creation process. So again, looking at your own chart, have a look at your strategy, and then have a look at the gates that you have defined in the sacral center. Now, if you want to get something off the ground and up and running, then just go out into a cafe or something like that and know that you'll now be interlocking with a generator or a manifesting generator, and you'll be feeling that energy in your sacral, and that is going to activate those gates that are there, and you'll just have this burst of energy. You'll know it as soon as you're in their presence. That's a pro tip. If you don't have a defined center, all you have to do is go out into the world and you'll be exposed to people who have that. Now, one tip about this, make sure that you're paying close attention to how that energy feels, because if people aren't aware and if they aren't doing things in alignment, then the energy that will be coming out and broadcasted from any of those defined channels could be not so good. So it's always about making sure that you're following strategy and authority, right? Where all roads lead back to that. And then finally, this is just my personal approach and experience when it comes to guiding, mentoring, teaching, which is what most of us are doing when we are doing courses, when we're coaching, when we're creating some type of product for our audience. We're stepping into that type of mode. And that is basically based on the G center. So this little guy hanging out in the middle of our chart. If you have that defined, then you're going to have a very strong sense of self and you're going to have a strong sense of direction. And people that you help and support are going to know that and they're going to feel really comfortable around you. So this is where your unique flavor, the way that you approach things really does come from. Now, if you have this open or it's undefined, then you're going to not have a specific direction, but you're going to have flexibility. You're more someone that's here to enjoy the journey and share in that process with the people around you. So it's just going to give you kind of your unique spin on the way that you approach and share different methodologies, strategies, tactics, those types of things. Bottom line, when you are sitting down to map out anything in your business, it always starts with strategy and authority. But when it comes to your messaging, and when it comes to your offers, and when it comes to the way that you mentor, teach, coach people, those three centers are going to give you some insights into the way that you're designed to approach this. Now, as I said, this should be no surprise to you. When you're going through and reading about each of the individual centers, reading about the individual gates that you have defined within those centers, they should feel good. If they don't, if you're sitting there going, none of this feels right, then I want you to just double check the time of your birth. And if you don't have the most accurate, then I want you to just try a different time of birth throughout the day. So I tend to recommend doing more in the PM and more in the AM, like a complete opposite, just to see what moves in your chart and see if any of that resonates. But conversely, for the majority of you, if something doesn't feel quite right or if it doesn't feel natural, it's often because we've been conditioned out of it. And I have experienced this myself where because I have a defined throat, I'm pretty chatty, chat, chat, chat. And throughout my life, I've had many people tell me to be quiet. In any scenario, be quietly. So you're talking too much or your voice is so loud. And so when I started sitting down and mapping out messaging and doing things like that, and particularly when I started my business, I was very against video because I thought, well, no one really wants to hear my voice. And so I defaulted to writing. Now, I actually am a writer and I love writing. But in the last few years, particularly since I found human design, I've really leaned into doing more video and really leaning into the power of my voice. And this is just simply because I discovered that I have a defined throat. And so it makes sense. Why wouldn't I do that? Lean into the things that are easy and fun for you and really question anything that doesn't resonate based on your actual chart. If you aren't resonating with that, why is that? And then really go down that path of, have I been conditioned? Has something happened where I now no longer believe that I have access to something that is inherently natural to you? So I hope that this was helpful. If you've got any questions at all, I do a Q&A session every Tuesday. So you will see that there is a link to submit a question. So if you've got any question at all, feel free to do that and it might show up in the next Q&A session. But if there is any other support that you need, you will find more tools and resources in the description below. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.